Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I just wanted to say I spoke with a man named Evan, and he got so many different degrees and traveled the world so many different times. And we talked about his past, present, and future. We talked about his educational background, and we talked about the Solution Party, and we also talked about politics and sci-fi and what ifs. And this is a great guy who has been across the globe and has seen so many dictatorships and have so many insights of what could be and what if something happened and what could be going on. But he also wanted me to ask him some questions, so I'm going to invite him to the show right now to go ahead and ask him some questions geared towards politics, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Welcome to the show, Evan.
Well, Kimberly, it's as always, it's great to be back. As I've mentioned before, it's a real honor to be on your show. I enjoy it immensely, and we always find interesting things to talk about.
Thank you. And I just want to go ahead and dig right into what questions you and I decided to talk about. So
Sure.
the first one that we agreed upon is, why, in your view, has immigration become such a hot button issue?
Well, there are a number of reasons, but I think that the first thing that we must do is look at the root causes, because I don't think that the root causes are discussed enough. And because of that, unless you have a clear idea of what's causing this problem, you can't really come up with solutions. You need to understand the cause before you can come up with the solutions. And so from what I have seen from living in Asia and South America, and having the wonderful opportunity of being in touch with people around the world, I think that we must recognize that there are four basic causes to the immigration problem. And the one I'm going to emphasize today is tyranny. That's one of the causes, the tyranny that we're seeing increasingly around the world. Number two is lawlessness. Like, for example, the terrible lawlessness that we see in south of the border, where Mexico and other countries have effectively become narco states, and the cartels control the politicians, the police, the armed forces, the judges, the government, workers, and people don't have any place to turn to. You can't. Who do you trust when everybody seems to be under the control of these vicious cartels? Number three, which I've seen a lot, even I've seen it personally, is corruption. Corruption is a worldwide cancer that is affecting countries, even in our country, the United States, but it's particularly bad in third world countries because of the politicians and the unscrupulous businesses that steal public funds for their own benefit. That takes funds away that would go for infrastructure, for education, for healthcare, and it also scares away overseas investors. And so it condemns millions of people to a cycle of poverty, which is the fourth cause, just poverty. Terrible poverty in so many of the regions of the world, caused by the three maladies that I just mentioned: tyranny, lawlessness, and corruption. So we need to, first of all, understand those causes. Now, why is immigration such a hot button issue? Well, one of the things I think we really need to recognize is that the refugee crisis is being spurred to a large degree by some of the world's tyrannies, like, for example, Vladimir Putin and the Belarus dictator Lukashenko, purposely sending refugees from Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere into Europe, knowing that will cause terrible political problems in Europe and weaken their democracy. Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua have caused millions of people to flee their country. And those refugees are weakening the democracies throughout the region, including in this country. Look how how divisive immigration has become in our country. And it's an issue that instead of people focusing on, let's focusing on ideas and how can we solve this, it's become sort of an emotionally charged tribal issue with people on both sides. And sadly, democracy doesn't work when tribal emotions dominate. Democracy works when people are focusing on the different ideas and coming up with the best solutions based on a variety of ideas. So that's one of the things I think we need to really frame this immigration problem differently, number one. Number two, the problems I mentioned, tyranny, lawlessness, and corruption, taking those on will be a long-term effort.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we need to think of short-term solutions. And a couple of solutions that I've proposed are more to address the short term, with the idea of lending a helping hand to the desperate, but doing so in a way that improves our own prosperity and weakens the tyrannies, the world's autocrats and tyrannies. Because right now they're using immigration against us. We want to turn that around and have immigration work for us. And is that impossible? I don't believe so. I think it's a question of imagination and political will. So the first stop, just to kind of summarize, is recognizing the long-term causes, and two, coming up with short-term solutions that benefit us and that weaken the tyrannies. I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, it wasn't. It was excellent. And to piggyback off of you, I don't need to say anything, but what I need to do is ask you another question that's not here. I wanted to ask, how is these countries, these large companies, countries such as China and parts of Europe, how are they handling the immigration problem? Because they're going through immigration problems too.
Well, China, being a vicious dictatorship, they can they not a lot of people actually seek. You see, one of the things that the tyrants in the world know is that refugees aren't going to go to a despotic country like China or Russia or Belarus. Nobody wants to go live in a country run by a bully. I've heard some people say, well, democracy is a Western concept. Not everybody wants to live in. And from what I've seen, everybody in the world wants to live free in freedom. Nobody wants to live under the thumb of a bully with the armed forces backing him up. That's why refugees don't look to go to Belarus. That's why they don't go to look to escape to Afghanistan. They don't look to escape to Syria. They want to go to where freedom and prosperity exist, and that's primarily Europe. That's primarily the United States and Canada. These are where the refugees want to go, and for good reason. And that's something we should actually be kind of honored by. That shows that worldwide people understand that we're the country. We're not the countries that are run by vicious dictators. And so right now Europe is having a terrible problem, as we've seen, because so many refugees from the Middle East, from Africa, are escaping absolutely horrific situations to try to get there. And unfortunately, Europe, it's very hard for Europe to absorb them. And number two, it's become a very, very vicious political issue over there too. That's why France recently, the quote unquote far right, which is extremely anti-immigration, has won, just really cleaned up in the last elections just about a week ago. And this is something that's happening in Germany, it's happening in Italy, happening in Spain. And we can come up, we don't have to have this sort of vicious, attitudes or emotions when it comes to refugees. We need to think of ways to solve the problem in ways that protect, our economies, our democracy, but at the same time contribute to our prosperity and weaken the tyrannies. So that's what we need to focus on.
Well said. Has the immigration always been a hot button issue?
It has been. It's been throughout our. It's always been a hot button issue. When back, throughout American history, there have been different groups that have been viciously discriminated against. Whether we're talking about Italians, for example, or Irish, or people from Eastern Europe. Now it's people from Central and South America, but it's always been a hot button issue. And one of the reasons is because the people in the country who are in the lower echelons of prosperity always feel most threatened by the thought that people who will work for even lower wages are going to come in and take their jobs. That's number one. But also, we have to recognize that there's a racial aspect to this as well. Not everybody is necessarily a racist who's anti-immigration. There are some who do so for purely economic reasons, but the racism directed at people who are different, people who speak a different language, people who have a different culture, people who look different, who have different customs. Humans tend to fear things that are different than people who are different. It's something that's very. I mean, I've seen this all over the world. In fact, in Japan, one of the words for foreigner is not a person. It means literally different from a person. And so you see this all around. I mean, the prejudice against people who are different, and and so it always has been a problem. But I think that we can get beyond this when immigration can be seen as being non-threatening on one hand, and even a source of solutions for so many of our social problems.
Okay. And, another off the wall question is, with uh, with China being a dictatorship type country, how is it that the Chinese, because like you said, China and Russia, they don't want to go over there. But I feel like, they should we should kind of invest in some of those values a little bit. Not to say that all immigration is bad, because it helps bring job growth. It
Hmm.
helps bring so many wonderful stuff to our country.
Hmm.
But I'm not saying to be a dictatorship. I'm just saying to have more rules so that, because there's been like 2 million undocumented people that hasn't even crossed law enforcement hands right now as we speak. Two
I
undocumented,
totally agree.
yeah. And so what I wanted to know was, if you had to invest some type of if you were president of the United States, and this is where China comes in at, if you were president of the United States and had to invest some values or some laws or some degree of some type of law into effect to help save America.
Hmm.
Not saying, I'm not bringing Trump into this. I'm just saying to help save not only America but the good immigrants coming over.
Right.
What would you invest into the United States to help bring harmony into the United States?
Okay. Number one, when it comes to illegal immigration, from I get it. I really do. I mean, there. I am against illegal immigration because illegal immigration is illegal. We don't want people coming into the country willy nilly. Obviously, we want them coming in according to the law. In accordance with our immigration laws, not just coming in and whenever they want to. But a lot of it, people who say they're or who are anti illegal immigration are actually just anti-immigration. Period. They just don't like people who are different than them, and so I just want to make clear that I'm against illegal immigration very clearly, but I'm not against immigration. I think immigration can be can be made to work. Now, let's just think of a couple of examples here. You know, we have a whole host of problems in our country, a whole host of problems, and we have For example, let's look at rural America. Rural America, many communities are withering away and even dying off because they get into this vicious circle where young people, because there's no opportunity, leave, which just causes this exacerbates the problem. They get into this death spiral of economic decline. So one of the ways we could reverse that, and one way that is already being reversed, is to have immigrants help repopulate some of these communities. It's already worked. Where, for example, there's shortages of labor in agriculture, in construction, in senior care, in mental health care, in domestic violence care. And so we could, have well-vetted immigrant people who wish to come to this country, who would be willing to relocate to some of these rural communities, assuming the rural communities are welcoming, and could help reverse the decline in rural America by providing labor, by providing children to go to the schools. A lot of the schools are dying off because there's just not enough young kids there anymore. And we could do it in such a way where it would encourage assimilation, where it would encourage that they learn the language, English, where they become involved in the community. We don't want to, for example, start a separate community. We would want to have a variety of different countries represented in the immigrants that are going to these, so that they are sort of encouraged to learn the common language. We don't want to have, hundreds from one country, because they're going to form their own little group. And we want to avoid that. We want to encourage assimilation. So we could revert rural decline. We could provide a whole range of services and labor to these areas and really revitalize them. And not every rural community is going to want this or need this, but I believe that if you do it right, we could make this work. Now, one of the ways we would make this work is that you see a lot of these people are escaping absolute horrific situations, whether it be tyrannies, whether it be unimaginably vicious drug cartels that are, threatening to kill their entire family. And they would gladly relocate to a place where they're provided with modest but comfortable housing, their basic necessities met, and you pay them just a song to work. And they would more than happy do this. And of course, you give them opportunities to get bonuses and increase their, depending on their performance. But you could pay a lot of these people very, very low wages, as long as you're providing them with the basic necessities in exchange to live safely with their basic necessities met. And they could then provide high quality, low cost senior care. This is a huge problem in our country, senior care. If you want to have your mother or your grandmother put into a quality senior care facility, we're talking multiple thousands of dollars a month, way out of reach for most people. Let's set up nationwide local senior care facilities that are very economical and high quality. And the high quality can come when you provide the workers with the training and the expectations to succeed. And so this is one thing let's talk about mental health and substance abuse issues. Substance abuse issues are nationwide. I have a sister who lives in a small town in Utah, and they've got fentanyl problems just like in the big cities. And so let's put into place substance abuse centers nationwide, staffed by well-trained immigrants, or even though anybody could apply. And for example, if American wanted to apply to work at these places, they would, and they would get paid an American wage. But for the immigrants who are coming into this country, desperate to escape their situation, if they have their basic needs met, you could pay them, minimal amount, but giving them incentives to improve, and by doing so, paying them more. So this is just an idea. And then one of the other things you could do is you could set up very inexpensive manufacturing facilities whose job is to produce goods that are low cost and can compete with China and Vietnam in other countries, third world countries. For example, we could have a team of Peruvians manufacturing, say, toys to be sent to Peru, and it would be labeled made by Peruvians in the US, and it would be price competitive with the Chinese made goods. The Peruvians are naturally going to want to support their compatriots overseas. This would be a way for us to use immigration to weaken, to attack, for lack of a better word, the tyrannies that are, some of these despotic countries that are able to produce goods very very cheaply, and can dominate third world markets. Well, let's come up with a way to take them on in a way that's going to, kick their fanny.
Well said, well said. And in your view, what are the sources of the worldwide and ever worsening refugee crisis?
Well, as I said, one of the things that we need to recognize are the four principal causes. These are things that I think unfortunately, our politicians who use this issue for their own benefit never talk about this. But we need to recognize, as I say, the tyrannies, the worldwide tyrannies, are causing chaos in vulnerable countries to spur a refugee crisis, precisely to attack the world's democracies. And we need to recognize that this immigration issue is being used against us. When we have, go tribal on immigration, and it becomes just an emotionally charged culture war issue, that weakens our democracy. And the world's tyrants know this. And we can't allow them to manipulate our emotions in this manner. That's going to get us, because tyrants know that successful democracies are their greatest threat, and they want to destroy the world's democracies. Right now, we're seeing, for example, Vladimir Putin in particular. He is out to destroy our democracy, Europe's democracies, democracy worldwide, because the thing that all tyrants fear more than anything are successful democracies. So we've got to recognize that one of the weapons that they have is to spur refugee crises, and that's exactly what they're doing. Like I say, in Venezuela, there are probably 5 or 6 million Venezuelans who fled their country to escape the horrible repression of the Maduro regime. In Nicaragua, the same thing. Daniel Ortega, vicious tyrant, has caused hundreds of thousands of his countrymen to flee, and these people, naturally are going to want to come to the United States, as the United States is seen as the place where freedom and prosperity exist. So that's number one. The other one is lawlessness. Right now, our failed drug policy, or war on drugs, has been a complete fiasco. It has not stopped drug abuse. Drug abuse has increased. It's ever worse. And we have this perverse situation where ever more addicted Americans are sending ever more money to these cartels. And the financial power that these cartels have as a result allows them to control the politicians, allows them to control the police, the armed forces, the judges, the government officials. So when the drug cartel comes knocking at your door and they say, okay, we want your son to work for our organization, and we want your daughter to service our members. And if you don't like it, we're going to kill your whole family. What choice do you? You can't go to the police. The police are, the police are corrupt and working with them. You can't write your politician. Your politician is probably being controlled by them. The armed forces. Who do you go to? If we had a situation like this in this country, Kimberly, if for example, if a terrible underground, mafia-like organization knocked on your door and threatened to kill you unless you, turned over your kids and gave them, money every month, and your only hope was to escape to Mexico, I can guarantee you'd probably be on the first bus to Mexico. And we've got to recognize that lawlessness, the lawlessness that has been by and large spurred by this failed drug war, is a huge cause, and we've got to think of new ways to win this drug war, and in doing so, eliminate the drug cartels. And there's actually a real easy way to do that, and it's controversial, but there's an easy way to do it. And what you do is you destroy the economics. If you can't make money selling drugs, the economics collapse. And the way you do that is you just basically, okay, we're going to provide these drugs for free. And we're going to, for the people who want to use the drugs, okay, you're going to get the drugs. You get them for free. You don't have to buy them from a pusher, but we're going to provide to you therapy, and we're going to provide kids from an early age education on the dangers of flirting with drug abuse. But if you do choose to use drugs, okay, you're not going to have to steal. You're not going to have to beg. You're not going to have to sell yourself to get the money to get those drugs.
So, to extend my last question, or the question before that, if you were president, how would you work with the new Mexican female president to keep cartel members in jail and keep cartel members from harming our society, not only the U.S., but the Mexico and the Canadian societies and countries as a whole?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we're never going to win this war as long as the economics are so astoundingly favorable for the cartels. And you want to know what? It's not only the cartels in Mexico. I have a friend in Peru who works in Peruvian customs. Mm-hmm. Chinese companies are sending fentanyl to Peru to send to the US. I mean, it's not for Peru. So Chinese companies, Chinese criminals are manufacturing fentanyl to destroy the minds of our youth and to make money at the same time. So whether we're talking about Mexico or we're talking about other countries, in order to win this, in our country, we have to make the decision to approach the whole war on drugs completely different. Number two, I think that we should. What I have proposed is constructing what I call charter cities. These are cities that you construct from the ground up. That are charter cities are basically new cities which are can govern themselves independently. And so what I would like to do, if I could work with Mexico, is let's set up on the Mexican side of the border. Let's start constructing a city that will receive immigrants, where they can provide services, like I say, senior care, mental health care, domestic abuse, but also do this manufacturing, so that when the immigrants or the refugees are fleeing their countries, rather than trying to get into this country, they go to the charter city, where they can be assigned a living space, where they can be assigned work, and that way, if they want to, once they're in the charter city and establish themselves and have got a track record of performance, they can apply to citizenship in the US or Canada or elsewhere. But let's set up what I call these charter cities like breakwater cities, so that they arrive to the charter cities. They can have seek refuge there. They can be taken care of there. And now that's going to involve an investment. But if we do it right, the charter cities can actually be economically self-sustaining, where they actually produce like a GDP through services and manufacturing. So yes, it would require an initial investment, but we would get, if they're set up right, they can be self-sustaining economically. And the biggest fringe benefit is that we wouldn't have them coming in and flooding our own cities and causing this horrible culture war issue that we have now, which is something extremely damaging to our country.
I have two questions in one, and then we're going to move on to the questions that we both agreed upon. Mm-hmm. If you knew you had a weak leadership, would you take advantage of the fentanyl crisis by creating phase 1 of zombification, I call it, which is giving the children, the teenagers, and the college students and the older adults fentanyl, so that they become zombified and have no inhibitions or no beliefs, no nothing, just want to focus on using drugs all day long? How do you feel about that?
Well, the thing is we have to realize, when it comes to substance abuse, that there are some people who live and will always live only to satisfy their addiction. There's no hope they'll ever be recovered. And so with those sorts of people, well, what you have to do is provide them with modest housing, give them their drugs, and have them have access to therapy whenever they want it, and hopefully can turn their lives around. But that's much better than having them live on the street.
Yeah.
Look, if we look, in Portland, Oregon, where I am now, downtown Portland has suffered terribly because of all of the fentanyl activity that's going on. There's a nice restaurant where my daughter was working, and they have almost closed because people go to have a nice dinner, but they're seeing fentanyl deals right outside the window. And these people, they're camping out, they're relieving themselves on the street, engaging in sexual activity on the street. I mean, it's just ugly. And for people for whom the only thing they want to do is take drugs, and we just have to recognize there are some people like that. Okay, just get them off the street, put them in some modest housing, give them their food and give them their drugs, and give them access to always, to resources that will allow them to turn their lives around if they want to. But that's number one. But the other thing is that we must remember that most people get addicted to drugs before they're 18. And why does that happen? It's because the pushers in the schools target the most vulnerable kids because they know they can make money. The best business to be in is when your clients are addicted to your product. And so if you can get, you befriend somebody who's vulnerable, convince them to start taking these drugs that you're selling them, and they get hooked, and then they're going to come back and buy and buy and buy. And so if we take the economics out of the drug business, why would anybody sell if there's nothing to sell? There's somebody can get drugs for free if they want them. They don't have to buy them from a pusher. And once the economics are out of the picture, you're not going to have the pushers in the schools looking for vulnerable kids to sell to. So that's number one. Number two, from an early age, we have to have what I proposed as an addiction day, a yearly addiction day, where we teach kids one day of the year, starting from kindergarten, the dangers of addictions, and how to avoid addictions. Because I think we need to have people aware that when you start dealing with substances that are highly addictive, you're literally dancing with the devil. Let's educate kids from an early age about addictions, how to avoid addictions, why you should avoid it, and why you should need to avoid them, and if you do get addicted, how to recover. So education and therapy, and with the economics out of the picture, that's how we solve the problem.
Okay. And tell me, wow, that was deep. So do you feel that methamphetamine and fentanyl should be free and legal, or do you feel like maybe we should just restrict it, because it's getting to that point where methamphetamine here in Seattle, it's legal to have a non-distribution amount on you, so you won't get in trouble if you have a amount that you use but not an amount that you distribute on you. Do you think that
but the problem with that is that how did they get the fentanyl? They got it by buying it. And as long as somebody is willing to buy something, as long as there's that demand, the business is going to continue to exist. And so, we have to, the first step to solving a problem is facing reality. and the reality is that there are going to be some people who are going to choose to abuse drugs, no matter what we do. But what we have to do is take the economics out of it, so that if somebody wants to, like in Seattle, the reason why that's not going to work, just like it hasn't worked in Portland, is because it's still a product that people buy. And as long as it's a product that people buy, the Chinese are going to continue to send it to our country. The drug cartels are going to continue to send it to our country. And if we manufacture it and provide it free, okay, you want to take this, just take it, but you're not going to be able to live on the street. You're going to have to, live in this assigned living space, and you can take it all you want, and you'll have access to food, and you'll have access to therapy should you choose to recover. But at least then we know that they're not out there, begging for money to buy, or stealing or selling themselves or whatever to buy this drug, because it's free. And then once the money is out of the picture, um, the whole drug industry, illicit drug industry, will collapse. It'll just collapse. There's no money in it. It only works because of the money.
Okay.
I think it's really important to understand. We back in the 1920s, we did prohibition. We made alcohol illegal, and did that stop people from drinking? No, it didn't. It just became the business of the gangsters and the criminals. President Nixon, he had to have known that this war on drugs would be about as successful as prohibition. All it would do is make it the business of the gangsters, of the criminals, of the cartels. But as one of Nixon's former advisors says, the purpose wasn't to destroy the drug industry. The purpose was to go after political enemies, particularly, for example, in the African American community. If you redline the African American community, rob it of investment, rob it of opportunity, and fill it with and provide the only business to get out of there with drugs, selling drugs, then that will severely damage the African American community. That's one of the things that Nixon tried to do. He's used this not so much to destroy or to take on to eliminate drugs. He did it more as a weapon against what he perceived was his political enemies, and even his own advisors have admitted that.
How do you think that? I see your point of view, number one, with you cannot keep hiding the drug problem from people, the government, and drug addicts with economics by allowing China to bring product over here to sell. Mm-hmm. Now, my next question would be the court system, the government, the Supreme Court, the White House. Okay, how would we try to alleviate the cartel from being a part? I don't even understand how they are part in blackmail and do whatever it is they do in the older Christian value way. Because what I mean by that is way back in the day, they used to the way like thousands of years ago, the original Christians used to go into villages and say, well, look, if you don't give me what I want, which is having this village have a Christian value, we will kill you. And they had instruments, and it's in Rome. So that's how it sounds to me, like what you're saying about the cartel and what they are doing. And how do you think we can alleviate that dictatorship of the cartel being invested in mingling with serious high key players like the government?
Mm-hmm. Well, a hurricane gets its power from the warmth of the water in the ocean. How do the cartels get their power? Well, their power comes from the unimaginable wealth that they accumulate every year, because we have so many addicts sending so much money to these cartels. They overwhelm, they got more money, more financial resources, more access to lethal weapons than even the government. And Pablo Escobar, the famous drug lord from Colombia, he had a policy called bucks or bullets, and bucks or bullets. And it was like, well, if you're a politician or a government official or whoever, if you cooperate with us, you get bucks, you get money. If you don't cooperate with us, you get bullets. and he had the money to basically buy off politicians, to buy off the police, to buy off the armed forces. And as long as we're sending so much money to these cartels, they're going to have power to influence to influence and even control governments south of the border. Now, I think also there are a lot of vested interests in this country to keeping this failed drug war in place, and we have to recognize that. And the way to destroy the cartels is to destroy the economics, so they no longer have a source of money coming from our sadly addicted population in this country. We have this very perverse situation where I say we have ever more addicts sending ever more money to these cartels, and as long as that is in place, they're going to be ever more powerful. And in fact, it's probably not an exaggeration to say that most of the governments south of the border are really actually. I mean, I think the corruption really permeates far deeper than it is even realized.
Well said. You talk about charter cities, and I 100% times infinity agree with you. But there's actually no buts. I'm just extending the sentence to say, okay, my idea, and it sounds just like your idea, and I said this a couple of years back, was that we need a city, and it had nothing to do with what you said, in between Mexico and the United States, the actual border with the wall possibly up or possibly not, but two communities, one at the United States border, then the wall, then the Mexico, and one at the Mexico border, then the wall, and then the United States, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Where there's jails, there's apartments, there's structure, where
Sure.
there's stores and everything, where it's government ran, and that'll alleviate the tension off of the Homeland Security and the guards working there. And how do you feel about that?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. A breakwater city that will be where the refugees who are seeking, safety, seeking refuge from the horrible situations that they're, running from. They go to these cities. They'll be assigned living space. They'll have access to the basic necessities. Jobs can be assigned because we can, for example, we could have senior care facilities there. Now, if you've got the money to support to pay for local senior care in your own city for your elderly parent, well, good for you. But there are many, many people in this country who don't have that money, who don't have that kind of money. Well, they'll have the option. It's not going to be obligated. They have the option to have their loved ones in one of these charter cities with high quality senior care, very economic senior care. And so we'll be solving. We'll kill two birds with one stone. We'll address the immigration issue, and we'll address the senior care issue. And the senior care issue is just one of many that we could solve with these cities on the border. And like I say, they're breakwater cities. So then once they're established in the cities, if they perform according to expectations, then they can apply for citizenship or for a job in the U.S.
Yes.
Or we could even have them. Rural U.S. is not the only country with rural communities dying. This happens in Japan too. I lived in Japan many years, as I think I told you, and you go to some of these villages, in rural Japan, and it's like a science fiction movie. All you see are these old ladies, these elderly ladies, because all the men have died off, and there are no kids. It's something that's really sad. It's just sad. And this could be reversed by bringing in, foreigners to repopulate the cities, bring back the kids, have these elderly ladies having services available to them for senior care, and make it revitalizing this. And once the cities, these rural communities, are revitalized, they're going to attract young people who are tired of living in the big city. They can find, there are opportunities in these rural communities. Let's have a little more tranquil life in the countryside. And when people see rural communities are associated with a virtuous circle, in other words, things are growing, there are opportunities. You're not going to have this terrible situation where rural communities are associated with a death spiral, an economic death spiral, which is what we have now in so many of our rural communities, which is one of the reasons why rural communities are so upset with Washington and with our politics, because they see their cities dying off and they don't feel like anybody cares. Well, let's reverse that. And then let's solve the immigration problem while we're doing it. So through a combination of these charter cities and rural employment, we can contribute to our own prosperity and solve in a big way the immigration problem. But more than anything, let's get the emotions, let's get the tribalism out of it. Let's get the ideas flowing. Let's get the vision flowing. Let's hear the different points of view, and let's move forward. Let's not make this, what it is now, which is just this vicious tribal, shouting match that it's become.
Yes, it has. Last question. Are there any other ways that successfully address the refugee crisis that will positively influence the future?
Yes, there is. The thing is that one of the things that I proposed, now I know we're all tired of hearing things like war on drugs, war on corruption, or pardon me, war on terrorism, but I do think a worldwide war on corruption is something that could succeed. And the reason why it succeeds is because corruption is so pervasive worldwide, and people worldwide are so sick of it. If we can do an effective worldwide campaign against corruption, that's going to improve things dramatically in a lot of these countries where people are desperate because there are no opportunities, and there's no opportunities because the corruption is just never ending. It's a rinse and repeat cycle of politicians coming into office, robbing the public coffers, and then they leave after their political career. The new politicians come in and they just do the same thing, and you hear it over and over and over again. These politicians, just all they want to do is enrich themselves. Well, if we can get rid of the corruption, then a lot of these countries will start to prosper, and there will be less need to flee. And if we take on the world's tyrannies and tyrannies, I'm sorry, we can. And how are we going to take on the world's tyrannies? The same way we took on the Soviet Union, by getting our own act together and having an ever increasing freedom and prosperity gap between us and them. That's why the Soviet Union collapsed, not because we sent bombers and ICBMs over. The Soviet Union collapsed because the difference in prosperity and freedom was so great that they eventually collapsed. And that's what will happen if we get the world's democracies in working order. The tyrannies it's a miserable form of government. It never is associated with prosperity. It's never associated with a happy population. They will eventually collapse if we can make the democracies work. So to answer your question, let's take on corruption. Let's get rid of it as best we can. And I think we can do a lot to get rid of it. And number two, let's take on the tyrannies by kicking their fanny when it comes to freedom and prosperity.
Wow, that is deep. And I wanted to give you a bonus question, and I wanted to ask, if you let me get the question together, because I think about it off the top of my head. If you are to have the cartel get bigger and bigger and bigger, would they be able to reach NATO one day if they keep continuing to grow?
Well, the greatest threat to NATO is actually, the NATO is, because the democracies in in Europe are under threat right now. Yeah. And one of the ways that the cartels are increasing their power is they're moving into private industry. Like, I don't know about you, but I love avocados. And did you know the avocado industry in Mexico has pretty much been taken over by the drug cartels?
No way.
Yes. I'll send you the article. It's terrible. And I have a good Mexican friend who was saying, yeah, they'll go in, they'll tell the farmer, you've got 30 minutes to get your stuff and clear out, and the government doesn't do anything, and it can't do anything because the police, what do? You go to the police, but the police are working for the drug cartel. They're just going to tell the drug cartel gangsters that, hey, they came in and tried to do something about it. So go ahead and do what you want with them. But the greatest threat to NATO. But NATO, I think the role of NATO needs to be expanded. to not only protect Europe, but it should be expanded to protect democracies worldwide from hostile takeovers by tyrants. And so it has to be an alliance to protect democracy worldwide. You know, it's really, really, let me just say one really quick thing. Okay. Democracy is an experiment. That it's a relatively new experiment. Throughout human history, people have been ruled by small groups of elites, whether they be kings, whether they be emperors, whether they be warlords, whether they be powerful religious organizations. Democracy is an experiment that takes the power away from the elites and gives it to the people. But there are a lot of people in this world, powerful people like Putin, like the Chinese dictator, and like others who want to see democracy fail. We have to really understand and appreciate the gift that democracy is, because it's the radical idea that the average person should have a say in how their government runs, and instead of having a government that's run by a handful of aristocrats or dictators. And so we have to really sit back and appreciate this gift of democracy and defend it, and address the weaknesses that it has right now in our own country. There are a number of reasons why our democracy isn't working the way it should, but we can address that. We can make that better. So it's really important to understand, I think, that this is a critical time in history, because worldwide democracy is under assault.
I hate to say this, but how can the people reach you, Evan?
Well, the Solutions Party, if you go to solutionsparty.org, it's the website, it's the blog, and then there's an email called join@solutionsparty.org. I would love to have, I want to have more and more people join, and the idea is to let's focus on ideas, let's focus on vision, let's get the emotions and the tribalism out of the picture. Our greatest gift in this country is our diversity of ideas. Let's treat ourselves with civility, respect. Let's hear the different ideas, decide on what's the best ideas, and let's move forward. Simple as that.
In under 2 minutes, can you give the audience a brief description of what the Solutions Party is about?
Yeah, the Solutions Party is basically, it's meant to address some of the very fundamental problems in our country. But the fundamental problems in our country really start with our politicians. All of our problems start with the people in whom we entrust power. And why does this happen? Why? It's because because the most important thing that I will say today is this: power is addictive. Power is addictive. Once people get it, they don't want to let it go. And if you don't believe that, look at what Putin does. He poisons his political opponents. He rigs elections. He invades neighboring countries. The North Korean dictator, he sends entire families to gruesome prison camps. The Syrian dictator will bomb innocent people with barrel bombs. And in this country, our politicians, what is their priority? Their priority is staying in office. Let's look at this recent immigration issue. There was a bipartisan agreement to address the immigration issue, but one party decided they were not going to do it because they decided it wasn't politically advantageous for them. We don't want our politicians thinking what's politically advantageous. We want our politicians to go and work for us, to solve problems, to help us progress. So the Solutions Party has as its core a new way of electing our politicians so that there's no re-election. You serve one term and then you move on. And so there is no political interest. There is no, working doing what they have to stay in office. You get one chance to make a difference, do your best and then move on. So it's meant to address the weaknesses. The Solutions Party at its core is a set of ideas to address the weaknesses in our current democratic system and to come up with a range of ideas to improve things both politically and economically. and address some of the social problems at the same time.
Thank you so much, Evan, for joining the show again. Hopefully we can have you come back on the show for some more questions. I cannot wait. You are so
Yes.
smart. Okay.
So are you. You're
Thank
wonderful. You're eloquent, and I just enjoy immensely this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start publishing or giving you like an article of the week. And if it's something that interests you, we can come on and discuss it in detail. But Kimberly, it's always an honor and a true pleasure. And I can't tell you how happy I am to be on your show.
Thank you so much. Stay on the line. Thank you guys for joining the show. Y'all take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys another time. Bye.